But you can think about this as if it was like a bow and arrow, okay? So when we lead from the feminine and we lead from that receptive energy, we imagine that arrow pulling back. So we pull back, we pull back, we pull back, we go into that receiving mode. We're pulling back, we're coming into that receiving mode, we're pulling back, pulling back, pulling back. And if you think about what happens when you pull that bow and arrow back, the more you pull it back, the more tension is created for you to move forward. So the more you pull back, the more powerful you're being, the more that tension is representative of that magnetic effect that you are creating in your energy. So you're pulling back and you're leading from that feminine space, you pull back, you pull back, you pull back, then that masculine action that's going to come, it's going to be like a tidal wave. A tidal wave, okay? We're not talking ripples in a pond here. It's going to be a flipping tidal wave, because you're pulling it back and you're pulling it back and you're pulling it back, and that tension of that, like, that is your magnetism. That is your magnetism. And I've seen this happen time and time again for myself, for my clients. Like, a really silly example of this, like such a little thing, was I had been invited out for a meal. This was a couple of years ago, and it didn't quite feel right in my body to go. It didn't feel right. My body wanted nourishment, it wanted rest, it wanted to be under a blanket. I think I had a bit of a cold coming on. And there was this old part of my brain that was like, because it was a birthday meal, there was this old part of my brain that was like, this is someone's birthday. You should go to this. It was a should. You should go. Like, this conditioned response, you should go. No matter what your body's telling you, just take a tablet, take a paracetamol, and you'll feel better. You can then get through it. Or maybe I can drink through it. Because this was still when I was drinking like a little bit. And then this other part of me that had come in, and this other part, she'd really come in like 2020 in lockdown, because the world took away all my masculine hustle and pushing, and I went fully into that receptive energy in lockdown. So this part of me that I'd really worked on in that time came in. It was like, love yourself first, listen to your body first over all else. And it was like, how nourishing does that feel? It's like that JOMO. How nourishing would that feel to not go to that meal? And I think it was like a burger restaurant. So it was like, wow, it would feel so nourishing to stay at home and have vegetables. Like, I was so excited about being under a blanket eating vegetables. Like, that is the fun that I have nowadays. Like, that is my fun. I get under a blanket and I eat vegetables. But in all seriousness, like, that was what felt right in my body. That felt nourishing in my body. So I stood in my power, I stood in my truth. I said, I'm not coming. Everyone had a lovely time anyway. It didn't matter if I was there or not. This is the other thing, right? Like, how often do we think that, like, the world revolves around us, and like, oh my gosh, like, it's going to make such a difference to that person if I'm not there. And like, it really makes no difference. Like, they really don't care if we're there or not. So yeah. So anyway, so I made the decision. I said, I'm not going, but I hope you all have a lovely time. 5 minutes after everyone had left and I'd said that, £500 arrived in my bank account. It was a gift from a relative, and it arrived in my bank account. And when I tuned into this, and this isn't the first time this has happened, it made total sense, because I was listening to my body, and I was pulling back, and I was pulling back, and I was pulling back, and I was creating space for that tension, for that magnetism, and for that thing to come in. And obviously we know on a neuroscientific level that our brain capacity to think more clearly, to be creative, to be productive, to be in flow, to have more energy is to focus on what feels nourishing, what feels joyful, what feels really good in my body today. So there's the energy side and there's the psychology side, and they both just come together beautifully.